And for the purposes of our next introduction, I'd like to bring up our state treasurer, Fran Bella Marone. And everybody, please, don't forget to do the poll before you leave, the presidential poll. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to make this next introduction. Ayesha Kreutz is a chaplain, political commentator, and activist. She resides in New York State, and she is the president of the Frederick Douglass Foundation of New York, and has appeared on various shows such as Glenn Beck Show, The Wilco Show, The Pudgy Miller Show, Invisible Conservatives, and more. Ayesha has also contributed essays to the Books of Life at Costs and Stumbling Blocks to Building Blocks by Elveda King. Ayesha contributes to articles that blog the Frederick Douglass Foundation and the Minority Reporter. She travels the state of New York giving speeches pre- and post-abortive counseling, holding various events and workshops, including having spoken at several Tea Party, Stand Up for Religious Freedom, and pro-Second Amendment rallies. In the realm of politics, Ayesha was the first alternate delegate for Santorum in 2012 and works to get Christian conservative candidates elected to office. It's really my pleasure to get to meet you because I'm on your email list, and I had mentioned to Sean that you'd be a great speaker, so I'm glad you're here today. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much for letting me be here. As she said, Ayesha Kreutz. I always like to do 4 things before I get started, so please forgive me. But first and foremost, I have to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Too often today, when everyone else is coming out of the closet, we Christians are going into the closet. But without God, and this great experiment that we call America would not exist, and neither would I. So all glory and honor be to God. May He have His way with me today and guide my speech. I also just want to say thank you to all the veterans that happen to be here. No words can express what you and your families have sacrificed for us so that we could gather here today. So I thank you. My husband, who's here. He is the backbone of our family, and we travel together. Without him, I wouldn't be able to do what I do either. I'd also like to thank Mike Long, the organizers of this conference, and for all of you for coming out here and letting me share with you. I'm truly humbled and honored. Well, a while back, on the last page of the National Review on Dead Tree, Mark Stein had a column called Sharia's Protector. In it, Mark Stein reprised a story, one he has recounted numerous times over the last decade. During colonial times, General Napier was working in a British-occupied India. He was being told about Suti. It's a Hindu custom whereupon when a man dies, his widow is burned on his funeral pyre. In response to the question of whether or not, while he was in charge, he would allow this experiment to happen while in his charge. And he didn't get all multiculturally squishy and ask if he could witness this great tradition as though he was on some cultural exchange program. But instead, he responded, "You say that it's your custom to burn a woman. Our custom is that when men burn a woman, we hang them." So you go ahead and burn your women, and right next to it, our carpenters will build gallows, and you follow your custom, and we will follow ours. And these days, that's what we have too little of: cultural confidence. Without confidence in our culture, we lose it. And that is what's happening on a daily basis today. We're losing our great American culture because those who destroy America are now teaching our children. And now we're going to further federalize this indoctrination system by implementing Common Core. Our government is purposely teaching Americans' children that America was founded by evil people and that it was indeed evil as a result. If children are the future, then what kind of future are we going to have as we allow them to teach them to hate us? On the other hand, we've heard all of our lives that America is the greatest country in the world. Well, which one is it? If America is the greatest, then wouldn't that suggest that our culture is the greatest as well? In the words of Sarah Palin, you betcha. And that's where the Frederick Douglass Foundation comes in. We aren't infected with multicultural tendencies to pretend that other cultures are better than that of America's, and thus allowing our own culture to be watered down and soaked in shame over every bad thing that's happened in America. Bad things happen. Our goal is to edify, educate, agitate, and empower people. The left is coming at us at 360 degrees, 24/7. It's up to us to stand on the truth of God's word in our diligent efforts to take back our country. The establishment has been shamed into cowering and biding its time rather than exhibiting the cultural confidence of General Napier. It's up to we conservatives and the Tea Party patriots who are aboard the freedom agenda to conserve that which is great about America and its founding. Being Christian, conservative, courageous, understanding that it's constitutional conservatism that unites us. The Obama administration is filled with something Frederick Douglass Foundation Mac Wrights calls bureaucratic sclerosis, or BS. We need to go over the heads of the liberal infiltrated systems. And let me gloss over and share with you some foundational principles that will help you when you go into battle to debate on behalf of conservatism in the inner city. Let us help you build a method on behalf that won't be mocked, but instead will be appreciated more than you can imagine. First, show up. And I literally mean that. Show up. Second, don't take on conversations at a college level with people who have a third-grade understanding. For example, the left tries to convince us that the Founding Fathers were evil because they founded a nation on slavery. The Frederick Douglass Foundation teaches us how this is incorrect. Slavery existed before the nation did, and it happened to exist on this land where our nation was founded. Just as Frederick Douglass was born a slave, Thomas Jefferson was born a slaveholder. At the time, when men were considered property, and the freedom of blacks, if they did have it, was fraught with peril. With that in mind, we should give our Founding Fathers some latitude. Upon the issuance of the Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson, our Founding Fathers had decided to risk their lives, fortunes, and honors to throw off the colonial yoke of Great Britain. Ending slavery simultaneously would have been a logistical nightmare that would have all but ensured the failure of the Revolutionary War to come. It is like the chicken and the egg story. Many of our Founding Fathers were indeed anti-slavery. They just weren't in charge of their own nation, which is why they fought a Revolutionary War. Nonetheless, even slaveholder Thomas Jefferson, including in the Declaration, that would establish a set of bedrock principles that would later necessitate the abolition of slavery, that all men are created equal with the God-given inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. President Abraham Lincoln, the first Republican president, would later incorporate these same principles in the Gettysburg Address. We all know, 407 years and 20 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedication to the proposition that all men are created equal. But 50 years later, Martin Luther King Jr. would allude to these words again in the lesser parts of his I Have a Dream speech. 50 years ago, he said, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. A paragraph later, he says, in a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words on the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would guarantee the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Even Martin Luther King Jr. knew he stood on the shoulders of great men, and he wasn't going to ignore it simply because of the color of his skin. But how often do you hear that portion of his speech? So while the nation's founding didn't perfectly coincide with the New World shedding of the sin of slavery, it was indeed founded as a nation that would necessitate the ending of slavery if it were ever to live up to the principles in which it was founded. The nation wasn't founded so that white men could enslave black men. That was already happening. The nation was actually founded so that it would end. How can that be evil? And how often do you hear the story told like that? Not very often, I'm sure. And that's the problem. We've lost our cultural confidence. So much that we're either too afraid to speak out about it, or we lack the historical context thanks to the left's takeover of our institutions. And keep that in mind when confronted with the left's arguments for redefining marriage. The meaning of marriage came from God. It existed like slavery before the founding of America. Does using government to destroy the biblical sacrament of marriage by changing its meaning and thus making marriage meaningless serve society in the same way as eliminating slavery did? Only a leftist, liberal, progressive mindset would consider marriage akin to slavery. And as a black woman, I can tell you it's very offensive. But this is where we come in with our educational programs. Let me refer back to the so-called fact that at our nation's founding, the black man was considered property. He wasn't fully human, known as the 3/5 clause, but it was an anti-slavery clause, only there for representation. And we know that, just as Frederick Douglass discovered for himself. But when you're considered the 3/5, it doesn't really matter what the reason. Just ask those who have been denied personhood in the past. The Jew, the slave, disabled, Indians, and then today, the preborn child. When a man isn't considered a person but rather property, it's easier for men to beat, whip, slave, slaughter, and exploit that man. And we at the Frederick Douglass Foundation set out to do something about that. One of the projects we're spearheading, Am I Not a Child? It's called, or the Black Personhood Initiative. We're working with other pro-life organizations, New Yorkers for Constitutional for Freedom, Compass Care within the inner city in Monroe County, going and reaching out to inner city pastors throughout the state to help put forth that idea of when conception starts. We want to help get legislation introduced in New York that would establish personhood at conception. At conception, the DNA blueprint is developed and establishes a unique person. Considering the preborn baby a person makes it harder for you to want to commit abortion on that baby. This is not about legislatively outlawing abortion, as once you get enough votes to actually have it passed constitutionally, you don't really need it. It's about cultivating a culture of life and acceptance. Presently, in Monroe County, we have about $10,000 worth of educational commercials running on a daily basis, telling the truth about how abortion disproportionately affects the minority community. If you want to know more about that, you can let me know. And while we desire to define all the preborn babies as persons, black or white, we call it the Black Personhood Initiative, as I said, to help draw attention to the racist aspects of abortion and help gain the support of the inner city faith-based community. Democrat politicians won't be able to sign on to this initiative simply because abortion is their most sacred of all unholy sacraments. But aren't you ready and willing to hear the arguments that they're going to make on why they can't define a black baby, boy, or girl as a person? Those are arguments the inner city will love to hear. This is the kind of civil rights movement that will help get a good conversation started, which can lead to teaching of real history and put Democrats on the defense for a change. After the black man was freed from slavery, there were still efforts to keep them from his personhood. The Democrat Party started the KKK to help keep freed blacks in line. We all know that, but how often enough do we remind our liberal friends that they vote for the party of slavery, segregation, the KKK, and now the black genocide of abortion? The liberals never apologize for that, but they call us the racist. We need the cultural confidence to stand up to anyone calling us a racist. Liberal arguments are weak and fully ignorant of reality. Share this with your liberal friends the next time they want to win a debate on the cheap by calling you a racist. Charles Darwin is the cousin of Sir Francis Galton, who is considered the father of eugenics. Galton made his money by trading slaves, and his cousin's evolutionary theories to argue for the elimination of the black man from society. Darwin came up with the theory that we evolved from apes to argue that the black man was inferior to the white man because we more closely look like the apes we supposedly evolved from. I don't care if liberals think that they evolved from monkeys. It helps explain why they act like animals. As for me, I was made in the image of God. The liberals want to teach their children that as one generation away from apes, they are superior to their parents. My children understand that I'm one close generation closer to the humans that God created, one generation closer to perfection. But let me get back to my point. The American eugenics movement spawned Planned Parenthood and the Nazi death camps. Margaret Sanger, founder of Planned Parenthood, even said that if we can't kill them out of the womb, we will convince them to kill themselves in the womb. Today, Planned Parenthoods are strategically located in the inner cities, where they will more successfully pick off minorities. And you ask your pro-abortion friends this: why do they never complain that it's unfair or racist when white suburban girls have to be forced to drive into the ghetto to kill their baby? What happened to equal distribution of services? Why aren't they complaining about the lack of abortion mills in white-dominated suburbs? What kind of equality is that? Or is it racist? And keep this in mind too. The company that makes Zyklon B, the gas that the Nazis used to kill the Jews, is also the same company that makes RU-486, a chemical abortion pill. Today in America, 1,200 black babies are killed every day in the abortion mills. And according to the Tuskegee Institute, in 86 years, the KKK lynched and killed about 3,600 blacks. Today, the Democrats' party abortion mill archipelago kills more blacks in 3 days than the KKK did in 86 years. In Roe v. Wade, in the 40 years since Roe v. Wade, blacks represent 14% of the population and have 36% of all abortions in America. And it's easier to understand why I'm a black conservative woman when the connections are made between the motivations behind slavery, segregation, the Democrat Party, and abortion. Like Frederick Douglass, I will not yield to the left's determined efforts to culturally wussify America into a third world nation of non-persons devoid of cultural confidence because they allowed their culture to be destroyed one aspect to another. I refuse to be forced into victimhood and to have my motivation stolen by those who love nothing more than to skim off wealth distributed to me through what they call entitlements. While this method of cultural oppression might not be the same as slavery, it is still oppression. Keep that in mind during the establishment's coming effort to legalize the illegal immigrant. More crony capitalism. Americans lose jobs, wages go down, more people become jobless and poor, and it's the low-skilled workers that are hurt the most. The Republicans want the illegal immigrants to work and not vote. The Democrats want them to vote and not work. When you can vote your way out of actually having to work, what do you think will happen? Maybe if the Democrats hadn't aborted over 55 million babies in the last 40 years, we wouldn't have to import voters or workers. Goes to show you, the battle between good and evil never changes, just the players do. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We need to keep in mind that when reaching out to those in the inner city, we need to stop telling them how great tax cuts are. People live in the inner city because they don't have enough money not to. They don't pay taxes, therefore they don't care. Tax cuts are for those who have already escaped. However, we should talk pocketbook politics. We need to explain why the Democrat Party's faith in the pagan religion of global warming is increasing the cost of diapers, food, gas, and heating their homes. The government-created inflation is the easiest way to raise taxes without having to vote on it. Ronald Reagan used to remind us of that was Lenin's argument. But even more important are cultural issues. We have become cultural wusses. Because people in the inner city are more culturally conservative than most moderates, their lives are more closely touched by the lack of two-parent homes, people in jail, on drugs, getting AIDS. They cannot connect the dots, but we can do it for them. They are more personally affected by the Democrats' efforts to destroy the family by taking away the welfare from women who get married. You want to talk welfare reform? Propose a welfare reform that won't strip welfare benefits of the safety net if they were to get married. Let's encourage marriage. Democrats want to keep women to remain single because single women treat the government like it's her sugar daddy. But if she doesn't lose the security blanket when she does get married, at least for a little while, she will be more likely to take the risk of doing so and exchanging her government check for that of a man who might not always have a job. This is better for kids. Children who grow up without a father are more likely to end up in jail, get addicted to drugs, and become gang members. It's that simple. People in the inner city know this, but the system encourages them to ignore this. And the Republicans are nowhere to be found like an absentee father. We need to be the party arguing for the change in the rules for the system. Right now, the system is less of a safety net and more of a spider web. We can win on Obamacare, taxes, fracking, and education. I mean, cities, as Palladino had even alluded to, schools in the inner city are criminal. The graduation rate for black boys in Rochester, New York is 9%. The rate of functional literacy for those who do graduate is about 50%. We are fast-tracking these kids to a life of crime and penitentiaries. Parents care about their kids. They want better for them, but they see no end or hope in sight trying to fight the system alone. And the blame needs to be placed right at the feet of the Democrat Party and its teachers' unions who have run the education system for the last 30 plus years. That's the plantation, and it's the Democrats keeping them there. We are sitting on one of the most slept on and winnable issues, school choice. We should be out there fighting for charter schools, homeschooling, the voucher system, and freedom from unionized school system. Furthermore, Republicans have to stop being cowering wimps every time some liberal calls them a homophobic or a racist or a bigot. It doesn't matter what you do, they're going to call you that anyway. When some liberal, hoity-toity chick calls you a homophobe, your first reaction should be a dismissive laugh. She'll be like, well, I never. What are you doing? I take myself seriously, and you're just a homophobe. Well, where did you get off laughing at me like that? Then your response has to be, oh no, I'm sorry, you called me a homophobe. Like I've never been called that before. And then laugh at her again. Then make sure you let them know. The term homophobe is the argument that every one of you progressives use after realizing that you've lost the debate. And the same goes for being called a racist or an Islamophobe. Don't let the left use terms to win a debate on the cheap. They can't win without simple arguments used to shut down debate. In fact, liberals can't debate anything. Look at Al Gore. His unwillingness to debate anyone is not a sign of confidence, but an admission of his cowardice. It's time that we stand up to these simpletons. They can't debate us. Just like C.S. Lewis said when he wrote of the devil, above all, liberals hate to be mocked. Mock 'em and mock 'em loud, with the cultural confidence of an unashamed American. And with that, I want to leave you with a bit from chapter 10 of Frederick Douglass's first autobiography, Narrative of the Life. Frederick Douglass had defied his master over and over in his pursuit of learning to read and write. And his master finally sent him off to Mr. Covey for a year. Mr. Covey was known for being so abusive that he was able to break slaves for other slaveholders. 6 months into his stay, Douglass described his mental state thusly. Mr. Covey succeeded in breaking me. I was broken in body and soul and spirit. My natural elasticity was crushed. My intellect languished, and the disposition to read departed. The cheerful spark that lingered about my eye died. The dark night of slavery closed in around me. And behold, a man transformed into the brute. Kind of sounds like the inner city, right? Days later, after Frederick Douglass made his last-ditch effort at being freed from this crazy oppression, Mr. Covey came to beat Frederick as punishment. Douglass wrote, as soon as I found that what he was up to, I gave a sudden spring, and as I did so, he was holding my legs. I was brought sprawling onto the stable floor. Mr. Covey seemed now to think that he had me and could do what he pleased. But at this moment, from whence came the spirit, I don't know. I resolved to fight. And suiting my action to that resolution, I seized Covey hard by the throat, and as I did so, I rose. Frederick and Covey fought for over 2 hours, but Douglas, in the end, had won. He wrote, the whole 6 months afterwards that I spent with Mr. Covey, he never laid the weight of his finger upon me in anger again. He would occasionally say, you don't want me to get a hold of you again. No, I thought, you need not, for you will come off worse than you did before. That is the kind of confidence that we need to take inspiration from. The left is attacking us from every direction, destroying every one of our institutions in the family unit, and too many Republicans refuse to stand up to this onslaught. It is up to us. We're the last holdouts. If we fail to preserve the elements of our Constitution that guarantee our rights, and instead allow the left to interpret these rights as the rights of the government to control us, there will be no more freedom. We are already being turned into debt slaves as our government continues to borrow 40 cents of every dollar that it spends. We must not accept the dominance of the Karl Rovian Republican squish assembly line. History is on our side, and it is our job to conserve what is great about America. Trickle-down government does not preserve freedom. It destroys it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayesha. Thank you. For the purposes of our next introduction, I give you the Dutchess County Chairman Hal Bragan.
Good afternoon.